So last year I made a video about 5 hot players and 5 cold players. Basically guys who were starting off really good and guys who were starting off really bad. Well, we're doing the 2024-25 edition of that video today. We have 10 players to talk about. Again, 5 cold, 5 hot. Let's just get straight into it. So I actually wrote down the guys from last year, and believe it or not, there are no repeats this year. Not because I tried to, but because a lot of these guys I would say are kind of starting off either, average, to be honest. Most of them are, or they haven't been really noticeably bad. So, one thing to keep in mind there. Now, we start off with hot, and there's a lot of players in hot that I could put into hot. But I left it at just 5, and I tried to leave a couple that were obviously like the obvious ones, and then kind of go off the board a little bit with guys that I think are really hot to start the season. And I also tried to limit it to one team per column. You are going to see 2 Montreal Canadiens on this list, one hot, one cold, so keep that in mind. But let's get right into it here, starting off with Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild. And these first 2 I think are actually like unlikely Hart candidates that have really broken out to start their campaign. Kaprizov so far through this season has 5 goals, 13 assists for 18 points in 9 games played so far this year for the Minnesota Wild. So, again, last year we saw Minnesota start off so slow. They fired Dean Evason. They brought in John Hines. They changed their coaching regime. Eventually, they weren't able to make it. But what was a really big fault in why they missed was because of their start to the season. Well, so far, they have started off really well. And I think Kaprizov is the most notable factor in why they have started off so hot. So he does not get enough credit for what he does for the Minnesota Wild, but he should. 100% he should. So, Kaprizov is my first hot player. I think that should be a pretty obvious one. The next one is Kyle Connor, who, even though he has less points than Kaprizov, I would say he's better all around as a player and producing on both ends of the rink. He has 9 goals, 8 assists for 17 points through 10 games played so far this year. So, again, he does have one more additional game thrown in there, but he's scoring, he's getting assists. He actually has a point in every single one of the Jets games so far, which I think is a big factor in why they are 9-1. And the only loss they have to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Connor had a hat trick in that one. So, this guy is just on an absolute tear so far to start the season, and so is the Jets. And a lot of that can be put on Kyle Connor for how well this team has played. He just looks really valuable right now. Again, scoring at the level that we expect him to. He's even putting up assists as well. Like, it seems like he took last year losing in the playoffs personally. And you love to see that if you're a Winnipeg Jets fan. So, those 2 were kind of the most notable that I would have to bring up. Obviously, there's a few others like Jack Eichel, who almost made the cut for this video. There's a couple other players that I thought, were pretty obvious. They're having hot starts. But I wanted to go for some other guys that might be a little bit forgotten and unlikely that actually are having hot starts as well. One of them is Cole Caulfield. And Caulfield has been criticized in the media many, many times before, maybe even by me on my YouTube channel here, but he has been known as the best 30-goal scorer to never score 30 goals, is what people would say on Twitter and other social medias. Again, you got to stay off that stuff because it really just will make you mad most of the time. But Cole Caulfield so far to start the season has 9 goals, 1 assist for 10 points through the first 10 games played so far. So he's a point per game. And I think that, point per game is good and all, but like it's not like hot. What was really notable to me, though, about Caulfield was the fact that he's scoring at a really good rate. He has scored a ton of goals to start the year. I think he is second or third in goal scoring, and I think he's tied for that remark as well. So if he keeps this streak up, first off, he will hit 30 goals. Second off, he might even get like 40. He might get to the range that people were expecting him to get to all these years prior, but he's just seemingly struggled a little bit. So with the Habs kind of looking like a 500 team right now, I think they're a game below 500, but regardless, still a 500 team basically. I think seeing Caulfield put up the metrics that he's put up, I think you can't help but be pretty happy with what you've seen so far from him and the Canadiens so far. Now, we're going to go to a rival of Montreal's, and that is the Ottawa Senators, where Tim Stützle looks great. Terrific. He looks like he's on another level right now compared to other guys on his roster. Stützle so far has 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 points in 9 games played with the Senators so far this season. Stützle looks really good. And again, we saw last year him start off a little bit slow, and he had a down year for his standards last year. But so far, he's already at basically 15 points. And there were a lot of people talking about how he could basically hit 100 points this year. I think that is very possible, and it is in the realm of possibility for what could happen this year with a lot of different players. And I think Stu, unless if he gets hurt, which obviously is a very unfortunate factor, but unless that happens, I think that he probably could get 100 points this season. So look out for that for sure. And then finally, the final player that I would say is starting off right now and is really hot is Jared McCann. McCann so far has 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 points in 10 games played. So the same stat line as Stützle, but basically just one more game played. I think that McCann is very interesting because with him, he's on I would say a much smaller market of a team, even though Seattle's getting up there and getting bigger and more well-known. McCann, one of those players who kind of gets forgotten a little bit, but him off to this start I think is great, and I think that he can probably continue this too, and continue this little, I wouldn't say streak, but continue this good start that Seattle's been on, because again, we saw last year, like we're looking at a lot of teams that started off really slow. Like Montreal started off slow. Ottawa basically fell off after November, and the Kraken were a big factor in why they missed. The big factor was November, and the start of the season was why they couldn't get in, because they were really good in the second half. So you're looking at a lot of players who have started off hot this year, who started off cold last year. So it's good to see those guys kind of taking a better jump, and McCann is one of those guys that I think should get shout out. Now, those are 5 hot players, and again, there's more than one. There's more than 5. Of course there's more than one. There's more than 5 hot players in the NHL, and it's hard to narrow it down to 5. I could have made a top 10 list for each list talking about hot and cold players, but I think at 5 is fair. And if there's anybody I missed, you can just let me know in the comment section down below if there's anybody that I'm not thinking of for hot or cold, to be honest with you. Now, let's get into the cold player. So we just spoke for about 8 minutes about positivity. Let's speak for about probably another 8 minutes about negativity, because why not? We love doing that on this YouTube channel. So we'll start off with Tristan Jarry, who Jarry has made a ton of headlines this last week and this last month. He's only played 3 games. He is 1-1, which when you look at that, it's not bad through 3 games, I guess. But he has a 5.47 goals against and a .836 save percentage. I'm going to wholeheartedly say he is one of the main reasons why the Penguins are towards the bottom of the NHL right now, because they're scoring. Like Malkin's scoring, Crosby's scoring, they're getting scoring from their depth. It's their defense and their goaltending that is really killing this team right now. And Jarry was a big factor of that through the first part of the season. And it's so bad that he found himself out of the lineup at all. Like, he wasn't the backup goalie. He was the third string, scratched. And now he finds himself in the American Hockey League. And Joel Blomqvist is up taking that spot right now, playing for the NHL team. So it's really concerning, especially since you just signed Tristan Jarry to a 5-year, $5.4 million deal. That adds a lot of concern in there, but I think that Jarry can probably get back on his feet eventually. Just give him a little bit of time in the AHL. Maybe you call him up later on in the season, and if it doesn't work out, then I don't know. But again, a conditioning stint is only like a 10-day thing, so he will get caught up soon, like in the first week of November, most likely. So we're going to find out what they're going to do with him and all that, but yeah, they can't keep him down in Wilkes-Barre forever with that contract for sure. But regardless, we saw with Jack Campbell last year. Maybe he just gets bought out, but I don't really know, to be honest with you. Next up then, we're going to go to Philadelphia, so Penguins fans don't feel as annoyed with me. We're going to talk about Tyson Foerster, who is in his sophomore season and is facing that sophomore slump. Now, last year we had Matty Beniers in our cold list. Now, Tyson Foerster is no Matty Beniers. I'm not saying that he's Matty Beniers at all, but Foerster's been cold. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points through the first 9 games played, including a scratch in there too. So he has been scratched so far this season already. And I think that when you look in terms of, you want scoring from your rookies if you want scoring from your rookies and your depth if you're the Flyers, and we just haven't seen that from Forster so far. So it's a little concerning, but again, it's his rookie season. So I am not particularly concerned yet. If we get into next season and he's struggling like this, then I will be a little bit concerned. But at least as of right now, I'm not overly, panicked about the issue, because I think that Forster's a good player. Some players go through this sophomore slump. I can name you a pretty good list of guys who have gone through that. And I think that when we get out of this, or maybe even because it's early, Forster will bounce back and he will get hot at some point. It just happens to every player. They at least get on a little bit of a streak, and then they kind of fizzle off a little bit. But we'll see if Forster is that guy to come back from that. Next one is Alex Newhook from Montreal. Again, we talked about a positive player from Montreal. We're going to talk about a little bit of a negative guy. Newhook has 2 goals through the first 10 games played this season. And I want to put a little bit of an asterisk next to that, because I think Newhook dealt with injuries last year. He was out for a lot of the season last year, and I think him starting off slow is making a few people overreact a little bit with how their depth scoring's been for Montreal. But again, I think a lot of people were really thinking that Montreal was going to make the playoffs this year. I was never one of those people that really believed that necessarily. So seeing Newhook struggle is not surprising, especially since he dealt with injuries last year. So you got to cut the guy a little bit of slack, and maybe, down the road he'll get better and find his groove eventually, barring, of course, he stays healthy, which is obviously you want the guy to stay healthy. I like Newhook. I like that trade when they acquired him, I think 2 seasons back in the draft. It just hasn't worked out since, but hopefully it will eventually. You got to hope so, at least. Next up then, Dylan Cozens. Cozens is a concerning one. 3 assists through the first 10 games played. And the thing is, Buffalo hasn't been bad, or they haven't been that bad. So it's not really that noticeable how he's played so far. But only 3 assists, no goals. And this is a guy who really struggled last season too. And seeing him struggle again at the start of this season is, it's concerning. And I think for Buffalo, they have a lot of young players. It's a deep lineup. Eventually, you're going to come to a point where guys are playing better below Cozens if this keeps up, and you might find Cozens lower down in the lineup than he should be. I don't know. It just seems like it's been a really big struggle for him. Now, I want to put an asterisk tonight because it's Buffalo, and there's a lot of players who do struggle in Buffalo from year to year, but seeing Cozens struggle this early after a year he had last year, I think you just got to be a little bit, concerned about that problem. But obviously, I think he will get on his feet eventually. I think he will get on a hot streak. It's just a matter of when, but it's got to happen soon. Like, you're in your I think you're in your 3rd or 4th season in the NHL, and you just seemingly cannot progress, and are stuck in that slump, I'd say. So hopefully Cozens can bounce back and get better, but overall it just hasn't really been that good from him so far when you look at the numbers. And then finally, the final cold player, and the final player we'll talk about in this video, I think I could not pass him up. It's Zach Hyman. Hyman only has 1 assist through the first 10 games played this season. And this is a player who scored 50 goals last year. And I just want to say this. We saw Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with Edmonton score 100 points last year. Or not last year, 2 years ago with the Oilers. I think Hyman is the example of that, because he put up a number so good, and then we expect so much from him in the following season. I think last year, in that 50-goal season, was a little bit of a maybe not a one-off, but I think it's very unlikely that it happens again, just because of the way that the Oilers are built, their depth, and I think that Hyman just doesn't look like that player this year. But we'll see. Again, it's early. A lot of players take a little bit of time to get adjusted and get up good into the NHL level. So you got to keep that in mind too. You can't just go in and, score like that. It just doesn't happen regularly, unless if you're someone like Ovechkin or McDavid. It just doesn't happen in that way. But again, Hyman, we know what kind of player he is. We know how he can play. It's just a matter of him reaching that potential again, and maybe not being a 50-goal scorer, but maybe being a 30-goal scorer, or maybe even at best a 40-goal scorer. I don't know if he gets 50 again. That was one hell of a year last year for him. So if he falls back down to earth and maybe even gets not even 30, I would not be surprised at all. But regardless, those are 5 hot and 5 cold players in the NHL right now. Again, there's more than 5. there's more than 10 for both columns for all of these players in the league. So if I miss somebody, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Maybe I'll do a part 2 talking about more players. Maybe I'll do this every month. But regardless, thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe down below. I would really appreciate it if you enjoyed the video. Also like and comment down below because, you know, why not? That's what YouTube makes you do. They don't make you do it, but, you know, it's down there to force you. Yeah, if you want to do it, I would appreciate it. But regardless, that'll do it for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.